Good Wednesday evening. Welcome to Legislative Watch. I'm your host, Joe Hafner, from the Gunther House of Friends Podcasting Network in the cozy confines of Studio 17. And though the weather may be weary and dreary outside, let me keep you warm and comfortable on the inside as we're sitting here in front of the fire and ready to talk politics. Welcome to the inaugural broadcast of Legislative Watch, and it is my intention that each week at this time that I take a look at some of the issues that are affecting our lives, whether they be on a local level, statewide, or national level, and occasionally perhaps even on an international level. But my primary focus will be on issues that pertain to Missourians as well as to Americans. Okay, that's where my primary focus is, but I will try to venture beyond that from time to time. Well, welcome to the program. Now about 5 minutes after 7 o'clock, and the show is doesn't have a whole lot of sophistication to it. Basically, it's just an open round table, and eventually I plan to have a point where you can call in and express your opinions. Right now, the easiest way to do that is through emails, which you can submit your questions and ideas to Gunther's House of Friends at gmail.com. That's Gunther's House of Friends at Gunther's House of Friends at gmail.com. And please, on the subject line, if you could, please put Legislative Watch in the subject line. That'll make it easier for me to filter out your questions, comments, and suggestions. Gunther's House of Friends at gmail.com, or call me on my Skype account at G800-486-8437. That's G800-486-8437. While I do have a Skype account set up, I don't have a way of making that work with my mixing board yet, but I'm hoping to remedy that situation sometime early by to late 2014 at the latest. Okay? Well, welcome to the program, and I'm going to start off the program by taking a look at some of the issues and laws and so forth that are going to affect across this country on the first day of January 2014. And one of the biggest stories in the news media today is concerning Colorado stores throw open their doors to marijuana buyers. Now, according to the New York Times, customers began lining up before dawn today to take part in what they called a historic departure from traditional drug laws focused on punishment and prohibition. And I hope this is part of a bigger trend nationwide. Now, I'm not advocating just using marijuana for marijuana's sake, but our pharmaceutical companies have had a strong hold on the mindset of Americans for a very long time, and this largely goes back to this old idea of really over a century's worth of ideas, in that you use, you abuse, and you get penalized. And I believe you should. But pharmaceutical companies could not find a way to capitalize on marijuana until recently. So, therefore, they started this campaign basically to demonize marijuana. And now I'm not saying marijuana is completely innocent. You know, there are drawbacks, there are consequences to using any medication, any drug, or any mind-altering substance. But when a lot of the chemical concoctions that are made in a laboratory are far more dangerous, far more potent than what you can get in nature, there is something seriously wrong with the system. But nevertheless, many had flown in or driven for hours specifically to buy a bag of marijuana in the state of Colorado today. For example, in Denver at the Medicine Man dispensary, which claims it is the closest marijuana retailer to the airport, as many as half the customers today were from out of the state of Colorado, just there for the first day that marijuana could be sold legally in the Rocky State. Now, the store's owner, oddly enough, his name is Andy Williams, certainly not the singer, said that he had redesignated about 60% of his medical marijuana to be sold retail, but worried that it would not be enough to meet the demands of the lines snaking out the door. Despite the long lines, Williams said that people seem thrilled to be able to walk into a shop, lay down $50 to $60, and openly buy the drug. Now, whether you like it or not, and this is his own words, this is Independence Day for the marijuana community. Now, people don't like breaking the law, and the burden has now been taken off of them. With security guards posted outside many stores and police and state officials watching closely, the day's first sales appeared to go fairly smoothly. That's according to Ron Camerzel, Director of Enforcement for Colorado's Department of Revenue. Camerzel said the state of Colorado had 8 investigators checking retailers' license, inspecting packaging and labeling, and ensuring that stores checked each customer's identification to see if they are at least 21 or older. Now, to supporters, today was a watershed moment in the country's tangled relationship with the ubiquitous recreational drug. They celebrated with speeches, hailing it as akin to the end of Prohibition, albeit with joints being passed instead of champagne being uncorked. Now, to skeptics, it marked a grand folly, one they said would lead to higher drug use among teenagers and more impaired drivers on the roads, and would tarnish the image of a state whose official song is John Denver's Rocky Mountain High. Well, the governor of Colorado and the mayor of Denver both opposed legislation and stayed away from the smoky celebrations today. While some 20 states allow medical marijuana, Colorado voters and Washington state decided last year to go one step further, becoming the first state in the nation to legalize small amounts of the drug for recreational use and regulate it like alcohol. Ever since, the states have been racing to devise rules detailing how to grow it, sell it, tax it, and track it. In both Colorado and Washington, recreational marijuana has been legal for more than a year. Adults can smoke it in their living rooms and eat marijuana-laced cookies without the fear of being arrested. In Colorado, they are even allowed to grow up to 6 plants at home. But until today, dispensaries could only sell to customers with a doctor's recommendation and state-issued medical marijuana card. Okay. Now, I'm in favor of using marijuana for medical uses to alleviate pain and the symptoms of illnesses and diseases like cancer. I have long been an advocate of that. I'm not necessarily in favor of just using it for recreational use, but as long as you're not hurting anyone, I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, to me, this is about as safe as alcohol consumption. Now, I'm not saying alcohol consumption is safe, but in small amounts, if there are medicinal benefits to this, which I'm sure there are, then what's the problem? Okay? Well, now it seems that any Colorado resident who is at least 21 years of age can buy up to an ounce of marijuana at one of the 40 dispensaries that began selling to retail customers today. Out-of-state visitors can buy a quarter ounce, but they have to use it within the state of Colorado. Carrying marijuana across state lines remains illegal, and the plant is not allowed at the Denver International Airport. Okay? So if you're planning to go to Colorado saying you're going to get some pot, you have to use it there, okay? Washington's marijuana system, by the way, is at least several months behind Colorado, meaning that fully stocked retail shelves probably will not be a reality at the consumer level, probably until about June of this year. While Colorado incorporates the existing medical marijuana system, Washington is starting from scratch, with all of the production and sale of recreational marijuana linked to the new system of licenses, which will not be issued until late next month or early March. Growers can start a crop only after they get their license. That's according to Mikhail Carpenter, a spokesman for the Washington State Liquor Control Board, which regulates the system and is processing nearly 5,000 license applications to grow, process, or sell marijuana. Now, with the advent of legal recreational marijuana, Colorado and Washington have become national petri dishes for drug policy. Their successes or failures will be watched closely by Arizona, Alaska, California, Oregon, and other states flirting with the idea of liberalizing their marijuana laws. Meanwhile, questions still abound. For example, Will drug traffickers take marijuana across state lines to sell elsewhere? Will recreational marijuana flow from the hands of legal adult consumers to teens? Will taxes from pot sales match optimistic predictions of a windfall for state budgets? And what will happen to the black market for marijuana? Well, skeptical federal authorities are paying close attention. Although marijuana remains illegal under federal law, the Justice Department has given a tentative approval for Colorado and Washington to move ahead with regulating marijuana, but it warned that federal officials could intervene if the state regulations failed to keep the drug away from children, drug cartels, or federal property and out of other states. Nevertheless, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. And personally, I hope this marks a change in the way pot and marijuana is viewed, and it's long overdue. On to other matters here on this Wednesday evening. In the state of Florida, there's a law on drug tests for welfare, and has been struck down. Yeah, yesterday a federal judge struck down an unconstitutional Florida law that required welfare applicants to undergo mandatory drug testing, setting the stage for a legal battle that could affect similar efforts nationwide. Okay. Well, Judge Mary S. Scriven of the United States District Court in Orlando held that the testing requirement for the signature legislation of Governor Rick Scott, a Republican who campaigned on the issue, violated the protection against unreasonable searches. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that the Fourth Amendment? Well, the court finds that there is no set of circumstances under which the warrantless, suspicionless drug testing at issue is the case would be or could be constitutionally applied. She wrote, the ruling made permanent an earlier temporary ban by the judge. Well, Mr. Scott, who had argued that the drug testing was necessary to protect children and ensure that tax money was not going to illegal drugs, said that the state would appeal the ruling. Well, that's hardly a surprise. Well, any illegal drug use in a family is harmful and even abusive to a child, he said in a statement. I don't disagree with that. But so are legalized drugs that are abused. Any drug abuse has that potential. We should have a zero-tolerance policy for illegal drug use in families, especially those families who struggle to make ends meet and need welfare assistance to provide for their children. Now, Florida passed the measure 3 years ago, and the case was being closely watched by several other groups, including Georgia, which passed similar legislation last year, but found it dogged by legal challenges. State data in Florida also showed that the measure produced few results. Out of 108 out of 4,086 people tested, 2.6% were found to have been using narcotics. State records showed that the requirement cost more money to carry out than it saved. In other words, you're spending dimes to save a few nickels. I don't know about you, but that is a stupid idea. But you're never going to know that until you do it anyway. That's why I've been opposed to a lot of drug testing for welfare recipients. Now, I'm not opposed to it in principle, but when it's wasting taxpayer dollars to spend more money to find the abusers than it would be to save a few dollars, I don't think it's a good use of state resources, of tax dollars. That would be like saying, okay, for example, this is a little bit far-fetched maybe, but say, for example, you had a section of highway in your community or roadway where people speed all the time, and only maybe 3% or 2.6% of those speeders get pulled over. Now, you go throw a bunch of resources into catching those 2.6% speeders, and you end up spending the equivalent of, say, 10% of your extra revenue, or even just your regular revenue, to catch that 2.6%. It's just not good economic sense. But the problem is the people that are advocating, at least what I see, a lot of people that are advocating drug testing aren't looking at the bigger picture. They're saying, well, we got to stop that. Well, Yeah, I'd like to see drug abuse and so forth come to an end too. But this isn't the way you go about it. Okay? I think a more effective system, and it'd be more of psychological warfare type tactics, is to do random drug testing. Not mandatory testing of each and every recipient. But say you had every fourth person that comes in, or some random sample each day of people that come in. Now, you're not going to know from day to day how many people are going to come in for a welfare recipient, to be a welfare recipient, or to sign up, or need to extend their benefits, or to cancel their benefits, or whatever. But if you have a rough idea of, say, you're going to have 30 people come in throughout a week, and you're going to average about 4 people a day, some days you're going to have 7, 8, 10. Other days you might have 1 or 2. If you do a random survey every day, I think that would be a far more effective system than saying, we got to test everybody. Well, as the country emerged from the recent recession, I think we're still in it personally, but numerous states, powered by the strength of Republicans in many legislatures, sought to make welfare or unemployment checks contingent on drug testing. Now, that is despite a 2003 federal court ruling in Michigan that struck down drug testing for welfare recipients because it amounted to an illegal search. And I agree with that. Because how is using, say, an illicit substance or narcotics any more dangerous than someone that goes out and buys booze with their unemployment checks? Now, I'm not advocating that you abuse drugs in any form. I believe in moderation at all cost. But I have control over that of my life, okay? I've vowed not to cross that line. And at the same time, you have lawmakers that are insisting upon welfare recipients go through this drug testing, even mandatory drug testing, or even random drug testing. But we don't require the same thing of government officials who are getting paid with taxpayer dollars. To me, it's only fair that it goes both ways. Because, a dollar going to a welfare recipient as well as going to paying someone's salary, I don't care where the money is going. That's my money that I'm working for, that I'm paying in taxes. So, shouldn't I have a better say, a bigger say, in that, well, okay, such and such who is unable to work or unwilling to work, shouldn't they be held up to the same level of scrutiny as someone who is elected to a job or works for a government? So to me it goes both ways. Arizona passed a drug testing program requirement 5 years ago. 9 more states, including Florida, have passed such laws since 2011. And at least 29 states debated such measures last year, but only 2 of the bills passed. In Georgia, the law's rollout was delayed pending the outcome of the Florida legal challenge. And in North Carolina, Governor Pat McCrory, a Republican, vetoed such a law. Although the Republican-controlled legislature overrode the veto, the governor has continued to object to the requirement, which he called costly and ineffective. Taryn Bragdon, chief executive of the Foundation for Government Accountability, a conservative group in Naples, Florida, that focuses on health care and welfare policy, said the Florida judge's decision would most likely result in states around the country adjusting their laws so they could meet constitutional muster. For example, some states that are now screening applicants and require drug tests only of those who appear to be drug users. The decision is not that you can't drug test applicants, it's that you can't blanket drug test all of them, which is what I've been contending all along. Well, yesterday's decision stemmed from a 2011 lawsuit filed by the American Civil Liberties Union of Florida and the Florida Justice Institute on behalf of a Central Florida resident, Louis W. LeBron, a Navy veteran and full-time student who had filed for public assistance. Mr. LeBron, who provided care for his disabled mother and was raising a young child as a single father, argued that it was unfair to require drug testing when no suspicion of drug abuse ever existed. and Judge Scriven agreed. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out in other areas of the country. Meanwhile, Howard Simon, executive director of the ACLU in Florida, said that the courts are now signaling to politicians that they are not going to treat poor people as if they were exempt from constitutional rights. So I commend the judge for making the right decision in Florida. At least what I see is the right decision. Okay. Let's see here. What else did I wanted to bring up on the nationwide observation? This is more towards lobbyists and so forth, or the unlobbyists, as the case may be. And this is an editorial that was published yesterday in the New York Times by Thomas B. Edsall. Now, the changing nature of politics has reshaped lobbying, not necessarily for the worse. Top dogs in Washington's influence industry are losing ground to a new breed. The strategic advisor with clean hands, who stands aloof from the grunt work of cornering members of the House and Senate and Capitol hallways, and the hassle of remembering committee secretaries by name, is now ascendant. Never mind those nightly fundraisers. Now, if you look at the numbers, it may seem that lobbying is in decline, but it isn't. It's just taking different forms. What was once straightforward lobbying has become, in effect, a full-service PR advertising social media operation, very little of which is covered by federal regulation. In other words, lobbyists have found another loophole here. Now, in a field buffeted by the economic meltdown of 2008, the current legislative standstill on Capitol Hill, the emergence of high-tech competitors, and the passage of the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007, which subjects registered lobbyists to a stringent regulatory regime, including the threat of criminal sanctions and prison time. Well, this shift is in the influence industry and poses a broader question. Are the days of glad-handing lobbyist carrying an envelope of PAC checks and the proposed wording of a client's legislative amendment numbered? Well, Carter Eskew, a founding partner of the Grover Park Group, which lobbies and provides a host of other services to clients, raised this question in a conversation with the author. Looking to future sources of new revenue, Eskew has concluded that, quote, relationship lobbying, unquote, is dead, or at least not where the growth will be. The traditional lobbyist, he argues, is no longer the eminence Grice of days past, but instead has been reduced to serving as a conduit for campaign contributions from corporate and trade association PACs to candidates. Now, in a question and answer session on October 30th with students at the University of Chicago, one lobbyist said about his firm, "What we do mostly is just public relations and strategic communication advice and guidance from a lot of different clients, trade associations, and corporate America." Now, this lobbyist is by no means alone in his role as a strategic advisor and not registered as a lobbyist. He and his colleagues are raking in large fees for performing similar services. For example, Newt Gingrich, the former House Speaker, was paid $25,000 a month. $25,000 a month for consulting and related services by Freddie Mac. Tom Daschle, the former Senate Democratic Majority Leader, is now a senior policy advisor at DLA Piper, one of the largest business law firms in the country, and in the world for that matter. And Anita Dunn, former communications director in the Obama White House, is now a managing director at SKDK. Let's try that again. SKD Knickerbocker, where she helps NGOs, trade associations, Fortune 500 companies, and nonprofit organizations craft effective communication strategies. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same, don't they? Okay. Taking a look at some national legislative issues I wanted to talk about. Of course, the biggest thing is new health insurance options, new consumer protections in the new year. Regardless of your feelings about the Affordable Care Act, this is something that you do need to know about. Okay, as this affects all of our lives. Today is a new day for the millions of Americans who finally have the security that comes from quality, affordable health care coverage. And those who already have health insurance will have better, more reliable coverage than ever before. From now on, insured Americans won't be forced to put off a paycheck, or rather to put off a checkup or worry about going broke if they get sick. Well, part of the problem I have with the system is that, I don't know about your health insurance company, but mine, my health insurance is through Aetna. Now I am forced to go in for a checkup or I have to pay a penalty. That aspect of it I don't like. I admit I've got health issues. We all do. If you live long enough, you're going to have some health issues. My case, it's mild obesity, high blood pressure, and sleep issues. Okay? I mean, I am getting better through self-medication and trying to regulate my diet and so forth. But while there's much work to be done, starting today, no family will be denied coverage because of a pre-existing condition like high blood pressure or asthma. Women can no longer be charged more than men for the same coverage. And no American will have to worry that losing a job means that you can't get health coverage. Well, I'm not entirely convinced on that, but we shall see. And small businesses may qualify for more financial help to pay for the new affordable coverage options for their employees. Excuse me. The challenges in our healthcare system were decades in the making and will not be solved overnight. But for now, more than 6 million Americans have been enrolled in Marketplace or Medicaid coverage and are getting a peace of mind knowing that they can get the care they need without losing everything they have worked for. I won't go through the entire list, but some of the things that you need to know include protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Those are among the new benefits and consumer protections that began today. There are new insurance options, no more annual caps on health benefits, and comprehensive coverage. Meanwhile, millions of Americans have already benefited from the health care law. Free preventative services, new insurance options for young adults, no more lifetime caps on health benefits, protections for children with pre-existing conditions, saving senior citizens money on prescription drugs, cutting back on premium increases, premium dollars that work for consumers, not just insurers, coverage for some Americans with severe pre-existing conditions. For example, the Federal Pre-Existing Condition Insurance Plan gave tens of thousands of Americans who were previously unable to get health insurance due to pre-existing conditions the security of coverage before the plans were available in the marketplace, and expanding access to care in the community. And I encourage you to check out the White House blog site and look up this article, okay? New health insurance options, new consumer protections in the new year. Just go to the White House website and look for their blog. And right now, as of this broadcast, it is the top entry on that page. Okay. Now, I'm going to focus on the Missouri legislature because that's the one that affects me the most and a good part of my listening audience. And an article written by a former colleague of mine from Crest Radio, who now works at the Missouri Net. This is on the Missouri Net website, posted yesterday. Governor Nixon renews call for Missouri to expand Medicaid eligibility. Governor Jay Nixon has stressed some of the ideas Republicans have pushed for reforming Medicaid and renewing his call for expansion of the program's eligibility using federal money. Nixon says 4.4 million Americans with jobs but no health insurance coverage will have that coverage beginning today, but says the legislature's inaction means nothing has changed in Missouri. Missouri's Medicaid system will operate as it has for years without additional needed reforms, protections for taxpayers, or new measures to promote personal responsibility, many of which are being granted for the first time in states that are moving forward. Now, he says Republicans and Democrats in states like Arkansas, Illinois, Iowa, and Kentucky advanced, quote, some common-sense market-based approaches to helping low-income working families afford the basic health care services they need to live healthy lives, unquote, and he called on lawmakers to resolve to pass a bill to strengthen and reform Medicaid the Missouri way. Now, Nixon, who began calling for Medicaid eligibility expansion at the end of November of 2012, did not use the word expansion in his address to reporters on Tuesday, instead referring to strengthening and reforming the program. He also said he supports some of the ideas that have been discussed by Republican lawmakers for reform, including accountability language that would give recipients some skin in the game, a term often used by Representative Jay Barnes, Republican from Jefferson City. Barnes authored a Medicaid reform bill last year and is expected to introduce a 2014 bill after chairing one of the two House interim committees on the topic. Well, Governor Nixon noted ideas included requiring co-pays, allowing premiums to be charged, and demanding personal responsibility. One idea he did not express support for is eliminating coverage for children of low to middle income families whose incomes make them eligible to buy federally subsidized insurance policies. He says it's really hard to tell a 5-year-old to go to their lunch bucket and get to work and make some money so they can pay health premiums. I will look very carefully at anything that deals with children. Now, some lawmakers on Barnes' committee, including Republicans, were also cool on that idea, but some Senate Democrats say they would not rule it out. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out in Missouri, and that's one of the issues I plan to keep a close eye on as we make our way through the 2014 Missouri legislative session, which incidentally begins a week from today. One other thing I wanted to bring up on Missouri in particular is that there's legislation that would give child welfare workers more time to investigate abuse claims. The Missouri State Supreme Court has heard arguments on 2 cases that could result in pending child abuse investigations being thrown out and the removal of names from the state's child abuse and neglect registry. 2 women filed lawsuits saying that child welfare workers didn't notify them within 90 days of initial abuse and neglect reports made against them of the conclusions of the investigations into those reports. State law allows 30 days for such allegations to be investigated and 90 days for the accused to be notified of the caseworker's finding. Representative Bill Lant has filed a bill that would give those workers 30 business days to complete investigations. He says that would be a good starting point, the details of which could evolve during the 2014 legislative session. Lant has filed the annual report on the findings of the Joint Committee on Child Abuse and Neglect. One of the findings in that report, he says, he wants to focus this year on improving training and support for child welfare investigators. He thinks that will help them reduce caseloads and thereby diminish the number of cases that go beyond the statutory timelines. So, another story definitely to keep an eye on as we make our way through the 2014 legislative session. Okay. And we're done with that one. In the meantime, let's see. So I can get this to pull up here, so bear with me. Okay, open this. Well, that pretty well covers the issues that I wanted to talk about on the program today as far as Missouri legislative session. In the meantime, focusing on the state revenue and the state budget, Missouri completed the 5th month of the current state fiscal year in November, with state general revenue for the year to date 2.2% higher compared to the same period in fiscal year 2013. The amount is still below the consensus revenue estimate, or 3.1%, on which the fiscal year 2014 budget is based. However, Missouri's revenue continues to be far healthier than Kansas's revenue. Kansas completed November with less revenue than originally projected, prompting an official revision to the state's consensus review estimate for fiscal year 2014. Kansas revenue is now expected to drop by nearly 8% this fiscal year, below the amount received last year. In the official estimate, Kansas budget leaders noted that the steep tax reductions approved in Kansas 2 years ago are a significant factor in this decline. Meanwhile, Missouri lawmakers completed the extraordinary session of the state legislature today with their approval of an incentive package to lower a new Boeing incentive plant to the Show Me State. If implemented, Boeing could receive as much as $150 million in annual incentives, as much as $1.74 billion over a 23-year period just to locate the plant in Missouri. And this article was published by the Missouri Budget Project on December 6th. Okay, well, that's a broad overview of what I wanted to bring up on the program for today. Just kind of give you a basis of what Legislative Watch is all about. And as we move on, I plan to have sound bites and hopefully eventually guests, or at least people to call in and send your comments and suggestions about legislative matters and of issues that affect all of our lives. I want to thank you for tuning in to this first edition of Legislative Watch, and I plan to be back again a week from tonight, again starting at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. Until we see each other again, my friends, catch you on the flip-flop, and live long and prosper.